Right, it's time to have one-to-one with one of our significant leaders in Africa, the man who headed the African Union for 8 years. And I think everybody like me should really get hold of this little equipment here because Musa will speak in French. I'm going to speak in English, or sometimes we're going to speak in Arabic too. Yeah. So we're going to confuse you a lot. So please, everybody should have one of those if you wish to follow us. You don't need it because you understand English. Musa, you have been at the helm of the African Union for 8 years. Long time. Over 8 years, what happened? Did you go forward or went backward? You headed the most important institution we have. We are Africans because without the African Union, there is no Africa. Correct? There are just 54 different countries with nothing in between them. We meet in the underground in Paris or in London, high, but nothing between us. You symbolize, you are the center of this. What have you done? What is in 8 years happened? Did you move forward or backward? And let us be frank, you are now unemployed, correct? You are out of job. So we speak freely.
Merci Mou, merci beaucoup. Je voudrais d'abord
I would like first and foremost to thank you to have invited me to this very important meeting and to be part of this foundation which is old of 19 years, 19 years age of maturity.
22-23 ans.
22-23 years.
Donc, Mo Ibrahim Foundation,
Mo Ibrahim Foundation and AU grew together actually.
We are actually proud because Musa also joined the board of our foundation the day he finished with the African Union. He was impatient to join civil service, the civil society, sorry. Please.
Donc, quitter la présidence de la Commission de l'Union africaine.
Donc, leaving the African Union Commission 8 years ago, I found myself within the Mo Foundation. There was sort of a continuity in the objectives to be met. Even though I find myself on the other side of the table, sitting on the other side of the table, you have a better see of yourself within the mirror.
Je crois que
I believe that talking of balance sheets, we should let others talk of our balance sheet. Because you may fall into self-satisfaction or you might be boasting yourself of something you haven't achieved. But it appears to me to be useful to be able to actually have a better understanding of the issue, to actually contextualize where does Africa come from, what does Africa do currently, where is Africa heading. I do agree with you. I don't want to throw another attempt on colonization, even though colonization is a reality, but we need to acknowledge that Africa has made progress, is making progress in a financial environment that has been decided by others. So, for Africa to have rights to speak, Africa is compelled to move within this architecture that has been built by others, which is unfortunately not to its advantage. I'm not saying this just to minimize or to run away from the responsibility which is supposed to be ours as Africans, which we're supposed to do it better than others.
J'ai eu la chance de diriger cette
I
organisation
was
pendant 2
lucky
mandats.
to run this organization for
2017,
2
j'étais
mandates
déjà 2 mois et demi.
from 2017. That is
J'ai eu la
2 years
chance de
ago.
visiter
I was
l'ensemble
lucky to
des
visit
membres de cette
the
organisation
entire
au moins
members
une
of this
fois.
organization at least once.
Et
And-
souvent, tu le dis, il faut
And
plutôt
at times,
parler
you tell them
de manière très concrète.
you
les
need
faits.
to be actually to talk. To
Il y a
actually
certes-
use facts.
Sur le plan conceptuel,
On the conceptual
avancées. Parce que
aspect, there've been
quand je suis arrivé, c'est au moment où on a
progresses.
lancé la réforme
We've made headways
institutionnelle et
because
financière de l'organisation.
the
En
institutional
2015,
reform was launched
un
in
constat a été
2015.
fait. L'Union africaine était au bord de la banqueroute.
UA was at the age
brother,
of
let us take some specifics. I would say that maybe progress on the free trade agreement was something tangible. But let me take, I think one of the most important commissions under you was the peace and security. Yesterday, I think we talked and all agreed that peace and security is the most important thing for Africa. And you had a competent commissioner heading the Peace and Security Council. But we had so many conflicts. So what exactly the Peace and Security Commission or Council agreed? What did it do? You look around you, everywhere is a conflict. You have a peace and security organization. Is it working? What's the score there?
Rien ne peut se faire sans la paix et la sécurité.
nothing can be done without peace and security, actually.
Il faut dire qu'aujourd'hui,
We
de
need
la
to say
Libye
that today from
à
Libya
la Somalie,
to Somalia,
du Mozambique au
from
Sahel, en
Mozambique
passant par
to
le
Sahel,
bassin du lac Tchad,
through
la Corne
the
de
Lac
l'Afrique
Chad
du
Basin,
Soudan,
Sudan,
il y a pas
South
mal de
Sudan,
conflits
and big lakes and the entire
qui en
continent,
partie sont
partly
dus au phénomène du terrorisme
due
et
to
de l'extrémisme.
terrorism and extremism.
Ce qui s'est passé en
What happened
2011
in 2011
en Libye.
in Libya?
J'étais déjà ministre des Affaires étrangères.
I was
du
already
Tchad.
foreign affairs minister
Moi-même,
of
dans ma
Chad.
vie jeune,
In my life as a
j'étais en
young
Libye
person,
comme opposant
I was in
politique.
Libya as a
J'ai fait
political
même
opposant.
mon entraînement dans un camp libyen.
I was trained in
Et
a
je
Libyan
sais de quoi
camp,
je parle.
and I know what I'm talking about.
No.
Les arsenaux libyens.
These Libyan
Président
armies,
Issoufou est
personally,
dans la salle.
President Yusuf
Ils sont
being in the
déversés
room, they
dans la
came
zone du Sahel,
in the Sahel area,
aggravant la situation déjà
worsening
extrêmement difficile.
the situation which was already bad.
Aujourd'hui,
Today,
tout le Sahel
the entire Sahel
est presque impacté jusqu'à
is negatively
pratiquement les
impacted.
États côtiers.
Even the coastal
Benin,
states,
le Togo,
Benin
la Côte
Republic, Côte
Le
d'Ivoire,
phénomène a pris de la dimension.
the phenomenon has grown, has
Qu'est-ce que les
increased.
Africains ont fait?
What has Africans done?
J'ai été témoin
I was a witness
de la mise en place du G5 Sahel.
of the implementation of the G5
Tchad,
Sahel.
Niger,
Chad, Niger,
Le Mali, le Burkina Faso,
Mali,
et
Burkina Faso,
la Mauritanie ont
and
mis en place
Mauritania
ce qu'ils ont appelé le G5
have set up
Sahel,
what they called
avec
the
l'objectif
Sahel
de mettre en place des
G5
forces
with the aim
pour
to
pouvoir
put in
lutter
place
contre le phénomène
forces to be able to counter and fight terrorism. There was no funding.
Par contre, il y a eu une mission des
However,
Nations Unies
there was
qui était
a United
au Mali
Nations
et tout le monde
mission
sait comment
that
elle a
came
fini.
to Mali. We all know how it ended.
Moi, en 2014, j'étais ministre
More
des Affaires
in
étrangères. je suis parti
2014,
à
I was
Tessali.
Minister of Foreign Affairs. I went to Tisali.
Quand les premiers kamikazes ont
When the
explosé
first
sur le contingent
suicide
tchadien qui a été
bomber
envoyé là-bas,
fell on the Chadian who was
je
there,
suis revenu à Bamako.
when I came back to Bamako,
J'ai parlé avec mes collègues ministres des Affaires
I was
étrangères, y
discussing
compris
with
le
our colleagues
président
from
Bazoum,
foreign,
qui était en son temps ministre des Affaires étrangères,
including
du président
President Bazoum, who was the president.
Et si
then,
des dispositions ne
that
sont pas prises
if
pour
measures
contenir
are not
cette
taken
menace
to curtail these
au nord
threats,
du Mali, elle va atteindre dans
in
nos
the northern
capitales.
part of Mali, it will get to our various capital cities,
N'Djamena a été attaqué.
including Jamina was attacked, Ouagadougou,
Grand
Bamako,
Bassam au Mali.
Grand Bassam in Mali,
en Côte d'Ivoire.
and
Et
Côte
donc, le
d'Ivoire
phénomène
also.
s'est propagé.
So the phenomenon spread.
C'est vrai, le dispositif de
It is
l'Union
true
africaine est là,
that the,
force en attente,
UN
là, mais nous n'avons pas pu,
was there, but we
faute
couldn't,
des volontés politiques
due
africaines
to lack
et
of
de solidarité,
political
faire face
African
au problème. Ça, c'est
will
la
and
première
solidarity.
chose.
That's the first
Et
question.
la communauté
Then
internationale,
international
notamment le Conseil de
community,
sécurité, ne nous a pas
the
soutenus non plus.
Security Council did not
Le
support
phénomène
us
a pris
either.
une dimension.
And the
Les causes sont
phenomenon
profondes.
spread, and the
Elles
causes
sont
are deep.
essentiellement
They are
un manque de
essential.
mauvaise
It
gouvernance
is
à notre niveau en tant
a
qu'Africains.
bad governance on our part as Africans. But we need to also acknowledge that there are exogenous factors that actually came and worsened the situation. We might, by naivety, relied more on the external support, and that actually we were caught up with that. But today, I do acknowledge that after 8 years to acknowledge what happened, actually.
Okay, okay, my brother. Look, I'll concede, and I think we all agree that the intervention in Libya was a disaster, and it was against the position and advice of the African Union.
Yeah.
People came, the French, the British, etc., with American support, and dropped a huge amount of weapons. Nobody knows where weapons ended up, and that ended up with many terrorists, actually, or jihadist groups, etc. Libya was broken and was never put up together again. We can see that. But there's so many other conflicts. Your hands have been tied in Libya, I agree. But there's so many other things happening around you. Now, you're telling me you don't have effectively the budget to do this. You have no money.
Yeah.
You talked about a standing force before. You guys made a decision. You're going to have a standing force which will go quickly to put out fires before they spread. And I think that's important. But you don't have money. Why you don't have money?
Écoutez, je le disais, il y a une architecture.
Listen, there is an African architecture for peace and security which has been working. A Security Council, a panel of wise men. There was a legal system that was properly set up. Last year, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the African Union Peace and Security Commission. That was the opportunity for me to make a declaration with criticisms.
Yeah, but Musa, just to let everybody understand. Yes. Are you saying that the peace and security cannot operate without a green light from the Security Council?
Non, pas du tout. Il peut agir. Il est
are you free to operate or not?
Faute de moyens, il n'est pas très opérationnel.
Lack of means made that we were not operational.
But legally, you are free theoretically. If the African countries gave you the money, would you have been able to operate?
Absolument.
Absolutely would have been able to operate.
So I think that is the problem.
Alors, je crois que c'est ça la...
Because as long as you're going to rely on Security Council approving your operations, we all know the Security Council have 5 members, everybody have a red card. Yeah? Everybody has a client state. And it's just paralyzed. You'll never be able to work because Security Council is useless. Security Council cannot make any decision. I mean, do you all know that? Did you hear of any resolution made by Security Council in any major conflicts? Did he speak about Ukraine? Did he speak about Syria? Did he speak about anything? You cannot because it's broken. Sorry, Amina, we are not having a go at UN, but you have a system which doesn't work. Everybody knows that. And if you become a hostage of that system because you are relying, understand, 70%, 75% of the funding will come from Security Council if approved, correct?
Il faut rappeler.
We need to remind you that it is the Security Council of United Nations that has got the mandate to actually validate funding based on the United Nations Charter. So we need to use for it to be mandated by the Security Council. The contradiction in Africa is that we have no means, at times we do not even have the mandates as Africans. In 2023,
you can operate if you have the money. You can say bye-bye to Security Council.
Il faut le mandat.
You need to have the mandate, you need to have the means. The terrorism is a threat to peace and to security
Yes.
in the nations. And this is the responsibility, the first responsibility of the United Nations Security Council.
If the,
pour cela que
okay, Musa, if Security Council is paralyzed, is not acting, you have a big war here, you have a terrorist group, are you, as an African Union, able to use your standing force to go and put out fire or not? That's a simple
justement,
question.
c'est ce que nous sommes en train de faire.
This is what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do.
Ce sont des forces africaines.
These are African forces, MISOM, that have been fighting for the past 20 years in Somalia. The forces of the Sahel G5, they've been fighting in Sahel. These are African forces that have fought and that keep fighting.
So you are able to fight without permission or the approval of the Security Council or United Nations. You have a free hand in your own Africa to go and put out fire. That's a simple question. Are you able to do that or not?
Absolument. Il faut qu'on se
Absolutely.
donne les
We
moyens.
need to give ourselves the means,
Nous, en tant qu'Africains, de manière
us as
solidaire,
Africans,
pour faire
in
face
solidarity, so
aux
as
défis qui
to
sont
face
de nôtres.
the challenges that are ours. If we do wait, we are going to be waiting for a very long time, and the situation is going to get worse.
That is
There's
the
nothing
point-
that needs to do.
That is the point we need to reach.
Yes.
Your problem as the African Union is essentially you don't have the money.
Yeah.
That's it. You
Tout
don't
à
have the
fait.
money.
Tout à fait. On ne se
Okay.
donne pas les moyens.
We
And
are not giving
immediately-
ourselves the means.
On ne
Yeah.
se donne pas les moyens.
Sure.
We are not giving ourselves the means.
You lose sovereignty. You lose the ability to make your own decision because you don't have the money. Now, the second following question: why African countries are unable or unwilling to fund their own union?
C'est ça, la faiblesse du
That is
panafricanisme.
the weakness of Pan-Africanism, the lack of solidarity,
Et la volonté de ne pas compter
and the will to count on oneself, that is on Africans.
On voit la menace.
We see the
Elle
threats
s'étend,
that
elle
spreads,
dévaste des régions entières.
devastating entire regions,
Et c'est comme
and
si rien ne s'est
it
passé.
is as if nothing was going on.
Ça, c'est quelque chose d'absolument
This is something
On a
unacceptable.
réactivé le fonds de la paix.
We've
C'est bien, nous avons
reactivated
atteint à
the
peu près
peace
400 millions
fund.
d'euros.
We've been able to hit 400
Can we
million.
ask our friends here in the room, when you go back to your countries, please ask your leaders, why aren't you funding the African Union? A simple question. Do you want the African Union or you don't? That's it. But to have a many-secure organization which is unable to function because it is not funded is not acceptable. I understand your budget is around $650 million.
Oui.
The total budget of the African Union, 650 million budgets. How much of that is given to you by others? European Union, other people. How much of 700 people is not ours? Somebody else paid. Be frank.
Entre 66 et 70%
Between 66 and 70%
du budget d'investissement
of the investment budget is funded by partners, and most of the times more than that.
I like the word partners because they call them partners. 5 minutes later, they don't call them colonialists, imperialists. But when they give us money, partners.
Pardon.
So let me ask you a question. Please, I'm not grilling you, you are my friend. But it's really, if you have a European Union, you guys pretend you are Africans and you are brown, African solution for African problems, blah, blah, blah. Excuse me, 650 million, your budget for the African Union, 70% of that is paid by foreigners. What are you doing? What are you doing? And those presidents go every February to Addis Ababa to hug and dance and sing. What is that? This is a farce. Either we are serious or we forget it. I mean, this is unacceptable.
Très frustrant.
I think
It
so.
is frustrating, actually.
I think that we need to have the pressure, we need people to speak out, to say either really we do it or we just forget it. Even your beautiful building in Addis Ababa was built by the Chinese.
Yes.
And then people said it was being bugged by the Chinese. Remember who asked American government said, yeah, why not? Let them bug it. I mean, they built it. Yeah. You guys had a fight also with the ICC, the International Criminal Court. I don't know, is Fatou Bensouda here? Because she registered for the court, she usually attends. I think you know Fatou Bensouda, she was the prosecutor of the ICC. And a few years ago, you had a go at her on the ICC because she tried to prosecute some African presidents. One is my president at that time, Bashir, General Bashir, for the massacres in Darfur. You guys became very angry in the ICC and said, why the ICC prosecuting African presidents? Correct?
Oui.
Correct. And we said, look, I mean, but the victims in Darfur, I mean, how can we get justice to those victims? No. You guys are targeting us. And at that time, the prosecutor was of the ICC was African, a wonderful lady. About 7 of the judges of the ICC court were African too. We had the major number of judges and you in the African Union declared this as like an imperialist court because how dare it charge one of our presidents? And then you decided that you're going to create your own court and use Arusha court to do that, right? What did Arusha court do? Did it prosecute anybody?
Je crois que la justice pénale internationale est une
I
nécessité
think international penal
pour
justice
lutter contre
is a
l'impunité
necessity
et cela
to
est
fight
dans les textes
impunity,
fondamentaux
and that is
de
provided
l'Union
for
africaine.
in the founding documents
Dans
of the
l'acte constitutif
African
de
Union,
l'Union
the
africaine,
Constituting Act of the African
L'Afrique s'est
Union.
prononcée
Africa
contre l'impunité, notamment quand
stated that
les
it is
crimes de
against
guerre,
impunity, notably when there are war crimes and genocides. And our recent history with what happened in Rwanda demands that.
Par contre, la démarche
On the other
de la Cour
hand,
pénale
the
internationale, notamment dans
ICC's
le cas
approach,
du camp
notably
du
as
Soudan,
it concerns the
a été faite dans des
President al-Bashir in
circonstances
Sudan, things were done in
assez
circumstances that were
confuses.
rather
Et d'ailleurs, la
confusing.
suite de
And
l'histoire nous le démontre.
the
Aujourd'hui,
sequel of the
la Cour
story
pénale
attests to this.
internationale
Today,
a
the
perdu
ICC has lost all credibility, and that needs
Et
to
donc,
be raised.
L'Union africaine en
So
son
the
temps a
African
dit,
Union at the
écoutez,
time said,
laissez-nous
let us
travailler sur le plan politique pour
work
ramener
on the
la paix
political
dans ce
front
pays
to bring
et la
back
justice
peace to the
après.
country and then justice afterwards.
Nous n'avons pas été entendus.
We were not
Un
heard.
groupe de ministres,
A
je
group
crois,
of
y compris le
ministers,
ministre
including
Tedros,
Minister Tedros, I believe, he was Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time.
Louise, qui était ministre des Affaires
There was
étrangères.
Louise, Minister of Foreign Affairs also at the time. So the African position was that one. This ministerial committee went to New York to talk to the UN on this issue.
On n'a pas été écoutés.
We were not heard. And that is the reason why the AU
De
decided
donner de compétences pénales à la
to
Cour
give
africaine
authority
des droits de
to
l'homme et des
the
peuples,
Criminal
qui est à Arusha.
Court of Africa of Peoples and Rights in Arusha.
Il n'y a pas eu suffisamment de
But truth be
ratifications
told,
pour que cela
there has
soit
not been
mis
sufficient
en œuvre.
ratification for that to enter into force.
Mais toujours est-il que la Cour
But
pénale
that being said,
internationale,
the
par la
International
suite,
Criminal Court
quand on a vu
afterwards,
ce qui s'est
when
passé,
we
ce
saw
qui
what
s'est passé, ce qui se
happened
passe
and what
maintenant,
has been
on va
happening,
faire
I think it is losing a lot of its
Cela ne veut pas
credibility.
dire qu'il faut
That does
prôner
not mean
l'impunité
that we need to
et qu'il ne
promote
faut pas
impunity
agir.
and that we should not act.
Yeah, but let us come to the core question here. Your resolution to use an African court stated clearly that this court has no authority to prosecute any sitting presidents. You're giving impunity to criminals.
Non, pas du tout.
I mean, why you create a court? We talk about genocide, and you say, oh, ICC is too foreign imperialist. I'm going to do my own court to do. But I'm not going to prosecute responsible people, governments, ministers, and presidents, etc. So what is who commits genocide? Do taxi drivers create genocide? Do fishermen create? The people who do the terrible things are sitting presidents. And that raises suspicion that really the African Union was acting as an executive club of sitting presidents who just want to protect themselves. And in order that, let us stop the ICC and let us create our own court, but our court will not prosecute us. So what's the point? I don't think there's any point in creating that. And the court have done nothing.
Non, la résolution qui a été prise.
No, the resolution that was adopted by the authority of the head of states in Malabo to grant authority to the African court does not exclude heads of states or any other person that might have committed war crimes, genocides, and what have you. But it is true, and I fully concur with you, that we haven't had sufficient ratifications for those provisions that were decided by the authority of head of states to be truly implemented, even if, and that is the contradiction out there, these founding documents, the constituting acts, clearly stated that we are against impunity. So I fully agree with you on this point. Even though the politicization of ICC is a problem, Africa needs legal, jurisdictional tools that can enable it to effectively fight against crimes against humanity and genocides, especially.
I find it very, very strange. We have an ICC there. If it prosecute Bashir, then the African leaders jump up and down. If it prosecute Putin, the West applauds and the Russia and its allies are angry. It arrests the ex-president of Philippines, that's okay. Then it indicts Netanyahu, the Arabs and Africans applaud, the Americans go crazy and sanction I mean, there is no win. If we need to have an international law, shouldn't we respect international law? Or if it prosecutes one of our guys, then we get upset. I think there's an issue there really, we need some clarity around it.
Absolument, c'est la grande question aujourd'hui.
Yes, that's the major question. International law, international humanitarian law, everything is violated, clearly, outright violated by the strong ones of the world, those that have strong allies, and this is questioning multilateralism that was built after the Second World War, and that is the big question today.
I fully agree with you, Musa. That's why I think it is morally, we need support bodies like the ICC. Otherwise, we cannot enforce any international law.
Absolument. Mais il faut être cohérent.
But we need to be consistent.
Absolutely. And because
Le double standard n'est pas acceptable.
Double standards are unacceptable, especially on matters of such essence, because we're witnessing what is happening in Gaza live. It is unfolding before our very eyes. It is mind-boggling. All of the common values that we founded our societies upon are being put on the back burner.
Who condemned the war crimes in Gaza is not Arusha, it is the ICC. So the ICC did what it's supposed to do. And then it get condemned. Of course, the Israelis are not happy. US is not happy. Then they condemn Bashir. Then the Africans are not happy. Then they do Putin. Then the Russians are not happy. I mean, of course, that's why I believe in the ICC, because it's making everybody unhappy. Yeah. Because that's what needed to be done.
Si elle est juste, si elle traite
if ICC is fair and putting everyone on equal footing without double standards, then it's ideal. That's the ideal scenario.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you cannot accuse them of double standard. They are going after everybody. Anyway, enough of ICC. We need to move to other areas because we're focusing on the African Union and a new experience there. Yeah. We all fought for the right of Africa to be represented at the G20. Then we managed to get a seat at the G20. You're usually been invited to G20 meetings before, but not to the meeting table, but the dinner table. You attend the dinner, but not the meeting. Yeah? Then you became a member after all this time. What have you done with this?
Écoutez, il faut se féliciter.
Well,
que
we
quand même,
need to
enfin, la
congratulate ourselves because finally the international community has seen value in involving Africa in G20 discussions concerning the world and chiefly Africa. Now, with respect to
Je
representation,
rappelle que selon le texte de
I would like to
l'Union
state
africaine,
that
le président de la
according
Commission est le
to
représentant
AU text,
légal
the president of the commission is the
Donc, c'est
legal
lui le chef
representative
exécutif
of the
de
organization, so he's the executive
Pour les
chief of
conférences
the organization.
internationales,
So for
le
international
président en
conferences,
exercice,
the
qui est un chef d'État,
acting
c'est le
president,
président
who
tournant
is
d'une
a head of state,
est également
these are
associé
rotating
à la représentation.
chairpersonships,
Il
is
a été
involved
convenu
in
maintenant à l'Union
representation.
africaine
So we
que c'est
agree
le
that
président de la
the AU, that it is
commission
the head
qui nomme le
of the
Sherpa
commission that will
et que le président en exercice
appoint
nomme l'adjoint au Sherpa.
the chairperson,
Et
and
que
then
tous les
the
deux puissent
acting
être
president
invités
will appoint the
au
deputy,
sommet
and both of
du
them
G20
will be
pour prendre
invited
la place.
to the G20 summit to partake.
But my brother, this raises a serious question. What you're telling us is that, okay, we have a rotating presidency, as you know, in the African Union. Every year it goes to different region, and one sitting president becomes president of the union. And it's seen really as an honorary kind of situation. It's not like everyday work. He doesn't show up in Addis every morning at 9 o'clock because he's running a country, he or she. But usually in Africa it's he, with the exception of our sister there. But now that raises a question. Fortunately, I'm not, but let's assume I'm a president of an African country. Let's assume that. And it's my turn, so I became president of the, what you call it, the council, president of the union. I'm now a member of G20. I have a meeting in Malaysia or Brazil or somewhere. Who I'm going to speak or represent really? Is it Africa or is it my country? I've been elected by the people of my country. Yes, and my job to defend them. Now I'm supposed to go to the G20, but I need to represent Africa. But what Africa? If my country is a high emitter of carbon, for example, my take on climate is different from the rest of Africa. Or because not all the interests of my country are in alignment with the general interests of Africa. I have a conflict. Whom am I representing now? The people who elected me, or a transitional job? I have it for 1 year to go and have dinner with Lula. There's a problem there. And at the same time, to be a member of G20, you need to have a Sherpa, you need to have an office, you need to know what you're going to discuss, and you need to know the other leaders. But then, that will be the first and last meeting, because you are out before the next meeting. Does it work? The current system, does it work?
Moi, logiquement, et je le répétais,
I mentioned that the legal representative of the AU is the president of the commission that is elected by the head of states. He's the legal representative, he's the executive chief of that organization, and logically, he should represent the organization
But that's not what's
at that
happening.
level.
That's not what's happening.
même si sur le plan diplomatique,
Even though, diplomatically speaking,
Il y
on
a
that
cette
diplomatic
dualité
front, there is this
de la
dual
représentation
nature
par
of
les
representation by the
conférences
two
on a eu un débat, certains ont
officials
dit même
at international
carrément que ce soit
conferences.
le
We had a
président,
debate.
parce que
Some
c'est un chef
wanted
d'État qui
the
représente
president,
le continent.
since he's the head of state, to represent the continent. But these are technical cases, these are technical issues that require day-to-day monitoring, and the president of the commission is the person.
Musa, we are dancing around this. Who represented us in India? Was it you
Non,
or the
c'est le président en exercice
No,
qui
it was the
a représenté.
acting
Okay.
president.
C'est pour cela que j'ai dit que logiquement, ça devrait être le président de la commission.
So you were the
That's
head
why I'm
of the
saying
commission?
normally it should have been the head of
Je
the
n'ai pas été-
commission.
je n'ai pas été invité en Inde.
So,
I wasn't invited to India.
Okay.
Ce qui est une...
So we have an issue there.
Which is an abnormality.
We have a problem there then.
Yeah.
Either the head of the commission should do that job, or we do like Europe. I mean, we have Charles Michel here. He was the president for 4 years and another for European Union, but he was then job to go and represent. But he has an office. He's permanent for 8 years. He can build relation. He can do that. So maybe we need either another position there, permanent, independent from a country, you represent Africa, or we need to say the head of the commission then, who is a legal representative, who need to have an office for the G20 you need to prepare. We go to G20 not to eat or to drink. You're going to do some work to fight causes. What are you going to fight for? And so this is the thing. We keep shouting we need to be in G20. To do what? Before we shout, we need to agree what we need to do, how we're going to do it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. UN. Now, people say, okay, Africa should have 2 seats or 1 seat, whatever, as a permanent representation in UN. How are you going to do that?
Non, il faut dire que les Nations Unies...
Well, the United Nations were built on
Ce sont des États qui
a
sont
states principle. States are represented.
Et la question maintenant...
And the question now,
ça se discute jusqu'à
as
là,
far as
il
Africa
faut
is
d'abord
concerned, the
obtenir
question is
des
still on the
sièges.
table. First of all, we need to obtain those
Nous
2
avons
seats
revendiqué dans le
that we
cadre
requested
des États-Unis, de ce qu'on appelle le
as
consensus des
part
États-Unis.
of what
En
we
ce
call
moment,
the
il faut
Ilwini
désigner
consensus.
ces États qui doivent
So we need
représenter
to select the states
Il y a
that
des
will
voix
represent
qui
Africa.
disant
There are
peut-être que l'un
voices
des
being
postes
heard saying
peut
that
être
maybe one of the
assuré
positions
rotativement
can be
par un État,
rotational,
et que le second
going
soit,
from one state to the next, and then maybe
attribué à l'Union
the second
africaine qui
seat
représente
can
l'ensemble du
be
continent
given to the
pour être
AU that
plus
represents
efficace.
the entirety of the
Je crois
continent
que ce sont des
to have
questions
more
qui sont sur la table
effectiveness.
jusqu'à là.
These are
Aucune
questions on the
décision n'a
table.
été
No
jusqu'à là.
decision has been
D'autant
made
plus que
just
même
yet,
les sièges
bearing in mind the
nous a
fact that we haven't even acquired those seats just yet.
So there's going to be some discussion,
Absolument.
the usual horse trading
Absolument.
between Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, who is going to have the permanent seat.
En tout cas, les États africains sont tous
The
égaux.
African states are all on equal
But
footing.
why, let's suppose, I have nothing against Nigeria or South or anybody, but how can a seat for, say, South Africa represent all of us? It's not an African seat really, is it? Will the South African representative there take instructions from you or from Ramaphosa?
Justement, c'est ce qu'il faut débattre. Parce
That's
que
what we need
l'objectif de
to
l'Union
talk about.
africaine
That
a un
is
objectif
exactly what we need to talk about
d'intégration
because the African Union's objective is to integrate the continent, to have common positions at the continental level. And I think it would be more useful, more original, and more
que des
efficient
positions communes soient élaborées
to
au niveau
develop
continental.
common
Même
positions at the continental
ces
level,
positions sont
even
portées par un
if
pays qui
they're
serait dans une
brought
situation
forward by a
d'obligation
country that will be put in a position
la position
that they have no other choice
serait
but to abide by the
plus
common
utile.
African position. I think that
So
would be
this
more useful.
conversation will be needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Now, as we see the trade war starting now around us and people using levies and as weapons now, etc., Africa position gets weaker because in trade, we negotiate as single countries. Yeah? Your country, Chad, what's the size of your economy of Chad? How many people in Chad? Can you sit across the table from China and negotiate a good deal? You can go and beg, but can you negotiate? You cannot negotiate.
Difficile.
Cannot
Pris
negotiate.
individuellement, la
Very
capacité de
hard to
négociation est
negotiate.
très
Our negotiation capacity individually is very
If
small.
Africa, in this kind of situation, is able to trade as a continent, it will be a different situation. So, when you think that situation is likely to arise, when the African Union will be in a position to negotiate important trade deals with other blocs. You sit with the African Union, European Union, I'm sorry. You cannot negotiate with them on trade. They can negotiate, you cannot. You're going to go to the White House and you're going to be eaten alive, yeah? So it's something obvious. How any attempt to move toward a situation where we can negotiate as a bloc.
L'agenda 2063 peut se résumer par les
The
triptyques
2063 agenda is as follows: integrated Africa, prosperous Africa, Africa in peace. So in the realm of integration, there are a few attempts, a few endeavors, and a few strides on a few issues. Like on climate, we had an extraordinary summit in Nairobi, and we developed a common African position. Even though we have to acknowledge it, in all honesty, it's not complied with by everyone. But if we are unable to achieve the actual integration of the continent, if we're not able to have common African position, if we're not speaking with one voice, well, we won't be heard.
You agree with me?
Totally.
Okay, so let us agree also not to mention 2006-3. I'm really sick of tired. Every time I talk to everybody, you say in 2006-3 we'll do that. I'm going to be dead by 2063. Can we do something now, actually? This is our urgent matters. And we need to get moving. The world is moving around us. And we are still, it will happen in 260s. But Musa, what do you need? You have been in a position, the center of this position of power. What is needed to convince African countries that it is for their best outcomes, they need to concede some element of sovereignty to the African Union and to say, okay, we'll give you our trade negotiations, you guys trade or negotiate in behalf of all of us, then we'll get a better deal. It's no-brainer. Why, what's the push towards that? Who's advocating this? Did you try to suggest that in your last meeting or?
Au mois de septembre dernier,
in September last year, I wrote a letter to all of the heads of states and government of the member states of the African Union to bring up a number of concerns, major concerns, notably on the peace and security front that you mentioned, also the weakened role of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union, also talked about our inability to be proactive, reactive, and during unconstitutional changes in power. That is an other concern that we have on the continent. Also, talking about the partnerships, we fight for representation, who's going to represent whom, even though it is clear that individually we do not weigh much. We need to develop common African positions, and we need to give authority to the Commission of the African Union, that is the executive body chosen by the heads of states, by the member states, to represent the continent and to speak on its behalf. Unfortunately, it is not a reality just yet. And I can say
what's the response of those guys?
il y a un déclin même du panafricanisme.
There is a decline in Pan-Africanism and in African solidarity, and that is quite concerning. As the world is moving forward, it appears like we're in the same spot and sometimes backsliding, and that is something concerning. We need to wake up very quickly. We need to understand that the world is changing, and the news reminds us of that every day. We need to take matters into our own hands, whether it's peace or security, or whether we're talking about the model of democracy or the management of the state. All of that needs to be devised by ourselves. Sometimes we've copied and pasted, and our youth and populations are questioning everything, and they are right. We need to ask ourselves, what is the model that we need to implement? That is a vital question, an inevitable one, if we don't want to be caught unprepared. This requires courage, this requires leadership, and this is something that has been lacking sometimes. And I believe such a platform is a suitable one
discuter vraiment sans
to
tabou
discuss bluntly the real problems that we are facing. Sometimes we are just copying, and this does not solve our problems. We have a young population that is asking questions out loud, that is speaking out, that is connected, that is seeing what is happening across the world. So that is an actual challenge. Someone talked about trust, because if there is mistrust, then it's going to be hard for us to be trustworthy and to be heard. And we might widen the gap between those upstairs and the ones in the basement.
I think we hear it from the horse's mouth. It's been in the middle of all this, retreating African, Pan-Africanism at all levels, refusal to strengthen the African Union, refusal to fund it, refusal to cede some element of sovereignty in order to benefit us all. There is a crisis there. And the question is, where is the public opinion? Where is the African people voice here? This is a very important institution for us. We need to support it, and I think we need to move forward, but we need to be serious. Otherwise, we're a joke. I mean, when I heard that 70% of the budget of the African Union is given by the Europeans, I mean, it's really shameful. And then you guys stand up, oh, European, you are imperialist, you are these colonialists. We need African solution to African problems. You have a problem, okay, pay the money then. That's the African solution to an African problem, isn't it? Why you go to Europe and say, resolve my problem? I mean, that's not logical. So we really ask all of you and to use your network, use your, talk to your friends. We need to put pressure on the government to say, are you guys serious? Do we need an African Union, or shall we leave it and go home? Let's not pretend we have an African Union if we are not willing to support it. I really thank my brother Musa for being very candid and very open, which I think was not easy maybe, but I did
very
thank
tough
him.
with you.
And I'm ready to take a couple of questions if people want to ask some questions here. No, you had a chance before. Don't keep raising your hand. We need other people. Questions, please. Okay, this lady in, the lady with glasses. Tell us who are you, please.
I will just have one question. I'm former EU ambassador to the African Union. It's a privilege to be here today. My question is for the African Union to play a global role like the seat on the G20. I know there have been discussions also in terms of the AU engaging in situations beyond the continent. What's your reflection, Moussa Faki, in terms of AU playing that role if you're stepping into the global, if you're stepping into UN Security Council and so on and so forth? How will Africa organize in terms of taking interest beyond the continent? Thank you very much.
Merci, Ambassador Brigitte.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Brigitte. I've had a chance to work with you in Addis for several years. It is the debate that we're having within the African family currently. We have set up a continental organization that has an elaborate architecture, and we are at a crossroads as far as the international scene is concerned, and we necessarily need to give the means to the African Union, the political means first, to the body that we have chosen for it to fully play its role. Today, there is a crisis of trust Mo, I went to Libya a couple of years ago, 2019 to be specific. I went to a camp where there were African migrants. I saw 50 girls between the ages of 15 and 18 years of age. 15 to 20 of them have babies. Looking at the color of their skin, I know that it is the invigilators that were the fathers in Libya. I said that these women have to be taken back to their countries. They're from East Africa. They said, even if we have to die in the Mediterranean Sea, we would rather do that than to go back. This just shows you how much despair there is. There's a young girl that's willing to cross the desert and to cross the Mediterranean Sea with the baby that she begot in Libya. She refuses to go back to her country. This is something that struck me, and I still have it in my conscience. If we do not act in a coordinated fashion, it's going to be very serious.
I don't think you hear this kind of stories anywhere else, really. It's heartbreaking stories, really. I never heard that. But thank you for sharing. I'm sure how much time I have?
Youssoufou?
We have a couple of questions. Okay, yeah?
President Youssoufou.
Bien, merci Mo.
Thank you very much, Mo. It is not to ask questions, it's rather to make comments and to add to what Musa has said with regard to what the African Union has done. As Musa said, we developed the 2063 agenda. I have to talk about it, even though it gives us the impression that we're repeating a slogan, 2063, 2063. But it is based on that we need to assess our progress. When in 2013 we adopted this agenda, we had clear objectives, and when we had the 10-year review later on, we saw that we completed 37% of what we set out to achieve. I'll take the example of the forecast that we made with respect to economic growth. For Africa to be a developed continent in 2063, we needed to have an economic growth rate of 7% every year, 7% on average. We did not achieve that. We achieved roughly 4% of that economic growth rate. At the time, we had 50 years to make Africa a developed continent. At the time, we had 50 years. Now we only have 38 years. So the fact that we haven't achieved 7% during that first 10-year period, 2013, 2023, that means that if we still want to achieve that objective of having a developed Africa in 2063, we now need, over the next 38 years, to have an 8% growth rate. And I stand to be corrected by you. So we need a growth rate of 8% for us to meet the objectives that we set out to achieve in 2013 by 2063. So that is with respect to the forecast and the economic objectives. Now, talking about security that we talked about, the security that we mentioned, security issue that we mentioned, well, we failed completely on that front. The project that we had decided to implement was to put an end to weapons in 2020. We're in 2025, and all of the regions of Africa are seeing war break out, notably Sahel. I was one of the stakeholders in Sahel between 2011 and 2021. It is a complete failure, unfortunately, because we were not able to implement the peace and security architecture that we envisioned for West Africa, that we envisioned for the Sahel. We preferred to implement ad hoc initiatives that failed to generate results. There was the J5 Sahel, that was one ad hoc initiative, the Accra initiative. There's the mixed force of the Lake Chad. All of that failed.
Mr. President, we run out of time. Please, we're running out of time. I'm sorry.
Je résume.
Well, let me summarize.
I'm sorry,
let me
we're in a
sympathize.
democratic process
Je
here.
résume.
Yeah.
Pour la sécurité.
All right, so let me
les
summarize.
insuffisances.
So for security, two weaknesses: lack of cooperation between Africans and lack of regional cooperation in the Sahel, especially. Second weakness, financing. Even though we need to finance our security, we cannot wait for the external partners to finance our security. And that's why I chaired a panel, a high-level panel on security and development in Sahel. So we are proposing regional cooperation between 18 countries. We want each of the 18 countries to contribute to the financing of security and to contribute 3% of their GDP. By proposing that these 3% are not taken into account when we calculate the country deficit. There's the AFCFTA. We talked about it today. This is a project that has worked. We've had a few achievements. Roughly 97% of what we set out to achieve was achieved. And there are things working in Africa, so we need to continue on that.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we appreciate really what you said, and we'll be very grateful really if you help us with the soldiers to release President Bazoum, whatever influence you have there, we ask you this. I'm willing to take one or two questions very quickly. Do you have time? Who is the state manager here? But please, questions in 10 seconds. Questions, no statements. Jendai.
Thank you very much, Mo. And actually, you've said everything that needs to be said. But I just want to say one thing. I worked with the AU very closely when I was working for the U.S. government. And one thing that I know was true, and it's true of all institutions, is leadership matters. And the AU was very effective during my time. And it was effective because of certain leaders, President Mbeki, President Obasanjo, President Wad, even Konari, who was the commissioner at the time. When Janet was the commissioner, it was very effective. And so you're not going to be able to unify 54 countries. What you have to have is a group of leaders. President Kagame, the AU made tremendous strides when President Kagame was the head. So you have to get a group of committed leaders who come together with a vision to move the AU, right? Okay. It's not all 54. And we haven't seen that of late, right? And then you have to have a commissioner that acts empowered. He's not waiting for taking instructions from all 54. He's working in concert with a group that have a common vision that can move the agenda. And so I think that there's some practicality here, and there's some responsibility here that has to be.
Jendai, the problem is, of course, is that this leadership moves every year geographically. And it's a matter of luck who end up being president.
No. It's not the president of the AU that matters. It's a group of presidents who are in office in the same period, and they stay for a very long time. So it's not like a 4-year thing.
Okay.
It's a group. It was Mbeki, Obasanjo, Wad. These are the guys who moved, that they created the NAPAD. They moved an agenda.
Leaders,
We need leaders, and unfortunately, they're quite divided right now. And they're also quite lack of energy, I would say.
Thank you. We accept your point. I think there's lack of leadership. Jendai was the Assistant Secretary of State for Africa some time ago, but you are young people, maybe don't know that. Okay, go ahead.
One here and the voice of the youth. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'm John from South Sudan, and I have only one suggestion that I need your reflection on. The African Union Agenda 2063 has 15 flagship projects, and the progress has been very slow over the years. Let us assume the leadership that is elected every 4 years, the chairperson, the deputy chairperson, and the commissioners. if the member state assign them only one project. For example, Your Excellency, if you are given the free movement as one project in 4 years, what will make it difficult for you to achieve it, right? Or maybe Commissioner Larato is here. We were talking about the airspace and the mobility within the continent. So if only one objective, one goal for each leader in 4 years, is it going to be difficult? You drop everything. You focus on all that one
Please, question.
agenda.
Question quickly.
What makes it more difficult to achieve the visa-free Africa? And if you are given another 4 year, Your Excellency, to just focus on that, are you able to achieve it in 4 years? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Monsieur.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Le Soudan du Sud est
South
un pays
Sudan
qui,
is a country
malheureusement,
that
est mal
unfortunately is not on the right track. It is the second country that I went to when I assumed office. After going to Mogadishu, from Mogadishu to Villa Somalia, I was in a tank in front of me and behind me to go see the president. A couple of months afterwards, I went to Juba, and I went to Ganiel district, where I met with women. They told me that they were Nuer women. When a woman cannot cry, when you do not see tears in their eyes, that means that she is soulless. And they were asking, they were saying, we're being raped because we're Nuer. So this is something that really stuck with me. And it's a country that I went to before its independence, so I know the leadership in that country. Now, coming back to your question, the free movement of people, of persons and goods was subject to a protocol. Even though we've adopted the Africa Free Trade Area, we haven't had sufficient ratifications for that protocol for the free movement of persons and goods and the right of establishment to enter into force. So that is a major contradiction. We are waiting to have 15 states to ratify, and we haven't reached that number. That is a contradiction. Internal contradiction in Africa. Even with the AU passport, even with the diplomatic passport of the African Union, it is hard to enter a number of countries. And I saw that firsthand as the president of the commission. People asked me to get a visa. I said, no, I'm not getting a visa. Let me try to go and see if they ban me from entering the country. And this has not happened, fortunately. So there is a contradiction. We have an Africa continental free trade area. We want free movement of persons and goods, and we don't ratify the protocol that allows that to become a reality. That is a paradox, and it's inadmissible.
Final question, I'm going to give it to you, please. But again, question, no statement, please.
Merci, Monsieur Mo.
Thank you very much, Mo. You won't prevent me from commending you for the quality of the documents that you've published and the quality of the figures that allows us to highlight the realities and the challenges that we're facing.
Thank you.
Je vous félicite aussi d'avoir
I would also like to commend you for preventing my friend and brother to present his achievements, because there are a few achievements. You've always made him talk about the weaknesses eloquently, I have to admit. So I commend you for that leadership in having this meeting. Now, the question that I want to pose is, currently we have a proliferation. Well, we've seen it, and we hope it will stop. We had a proliferation of coups. In West Africa, we've had 6 coups in 3 years. 2 in Mali, 2 in Burkina Faso, 1 in Guinea, 1 in Niger. In the African Charter of Democracy, Elections and Governance, it was clearly stated that a putschist, a serviceman cannot conduct transition or participate in elections organized to go back to constitutional order. The agreement on democracy and good governance of ECOWAS also prevents that. But today, all of these texts are not implemented. The juntas that are present in West Africa chiefly
elles
not
continuent
only
d'assurer
do
la direction des pays,
they lead their
mais elles
states,
s'apprêtent, elles veulent
but
confisquer le pouvoir.
they
Qu'est-ce
want
que l'Union
to
africaine
hog
peut
and
faire
hold
par
on to
rapport à
power.
ce recul?
So what can the
Par
African
rapport à
Union
cette
do
violation
in the face
flagrante
of this
de
democratic
ses propres
backslide
textes?
and
Il n'y
the
a pas eu
clear
de réaction.
violations of
Voilà ma question.
the
Merci.
documents of the AU? No reaction has
Vous avez
been
parfaitement
seen.
raison.
That's
Et
my
je suis
question.
moi-même, en tant que président de la commission victime,
You are
d'avoir
right.
dit
And as the president of the commission, I said that we need to abide by the text that we adopted ourselves, the Constituting Act
Conseil paix et sécurité de l'Union africaine.
and the protocol of the Peace and Security Council of the AU, the Charter of Democracy, Elections and Governance are clear on unconstitutional changes
C'est pour
in
cela, dans mon
power.
intervention,
So
l'échange avec les chefs d'État,
that's why
j'ai
when I
dit
talked
des
to the head of
choses
states, I said
où on
this.
estime que les textes
Either we
qu'on s'est
feel
donnés ne
like
sont pas pertinents,
the texts
ne
that we have are no
correspondent à
longer
rien. Dans
relevant
ces cas, il faut
and
avoir
mean
le courage de les
nothing,
mettre à
then we
côté
need to put them
et
to the
d'échanger
side
quelque chose
and try to develop
accepté
something
par nous
that is
et
accepted
peut-être
by us
workable
and that is
dans
workable
notre contexte.
in
Il faut
our
le faire.
context, then maybe we need to do that.
Contradiction
Otherwise, it is a paradox. We're saying one thing and doing something completely different.
Thank you, Musa. I think you'll agree that Musa has been candid and frank, and we really thank him. And please join me in applauding him. Thank you very much, Musa.